So, welcome back, everybody. Here we have the fifth and final game of week one of the CTL League, facing FAB Chaos versus Team Invaders, and here we have Gregory Patellis facing of Gian Arnandi for the decider match of our season 2 week 1 event. So, right now, right now we have seen from the Fab Chaos team, we've seen a Bravo star of the show, a Chain, a Briar, and a Viserai. And from Team Invaders, we have seen a Bravo star of the show, a Viserai, a Lexi, and a Bolton. So there are not a lot of characters left for either teams. There are not a lot of not so big players left for the tournament, and it's nail beating because it will also go down to the last game of the week. So right now we have Gregory Patellis on our side here, and the opposing side having Gian Arnandi from Team Invaders. It was a pretty close game. It was a pretty close game, last one, facing Lex with Briar, tying up to 2-2. So we haven't seen a lot of. There are still a lot of potential heroes being left to played from either team. So let's see what these two players will bring us to the table. So right now we wait for the players to kick off the game. So again, that's we've seen some matchups these days where we've not really expected to, like our previous game being Briar to an Earth Briar build to a Lighting Lexi. So it's some kind of games and some position that this kind of league pushes you towards to play that um, are not common, and that's really interesting about Flesh and Blood, because changing just a really simple thing in the matchmaking or how the games work just gives access to so much more potential for deck building or play styles or pretty much everything. And this is something to be expected because both the Visualize and the Stavro games have been pretty decisive in this league, and so that's something to be expected with these strong decks. But still, these games only count towards a single win, towards the whole week. That meaning that still there will be a lot of games to be decided from all the other kinds of decks. So it looks like that Team Invaders has fallen just a bit short with a bit of these off-metas heroes having to face some of the really strong decks like Viserai or Briar. but we'll see the decisive game. So here we see a Briar and a Prism. A Briar being played by Team Invaders, Gian, Arnandi, and Gregory Patellis having his trusty Prism. This should feel really great for Team Invader side from the Briar side, because Briar is supposed to have one of those really easy matchups versus Prism. It's Briar is one of those decks where she really wants to prey upon a deck like Prism. But let's see if Gregory Patelis has the skills to get and close up the game. So Gregory Patelis actually managed to snatch a ProQuest win on Constructed with Prism, and it looks like he will keep his trusted ally close at bay. And let's see if he's able to face off against a really strong Briar opponent being piloted by Gian Arnandi from Team Invaders. So the thing with Prism, and the reason that she has been really great on the latest meta and really pop up, is how good of a matchup she manages to have against a deck like Star of the Show, having all these really cheap new zero cost auras from Everfest, combined with cards like Merciful Retribution and Ode to Wrath, to really lock the game out of pretty much any Guardian archetype, making it so that the Guardian doesn't have the time to deal with all these auras, and at some point he's just locked out of the game, because the passive damage output that the Prism is able to deal is insane. But that's not the case with how a Briar match is supposed to go, because a deck like Briar, having all these cheap interaction, all these cheap cards, these cheap attacks, and having this so easily created embodiment of light, means that it's uh, it's really hard for the Prism player to really develop a big enough board to lock out a deck like Prism. So right now it looks like that both players have sideboarded, they have chosen their equipment, and it's time to reveal and have the first turn. So pretty typical equipment from the Briar side, having Grasp of the Arcanite, an Arcanite Skull Cap, the much loved Snapdragon Scalers, and a Fiendal's Spring Tunic, something to be expected when facing off a really slow deck like Prism. From the Prism side, we see a single point of Hurricane Barrier, Fiendal's Tunic, Dreamweavers, and Phantasmal Footsteps. So it's interesting to see how much of an aggressive route the Briar player will attempt to take, because we've seen the last game what an Earth Briar deck can attempt, but it looks like we might have again an Earth build or a Lighting. It looks like the Briar will kick off with a Red Sonata of Carnix with zero pitching, extra pitching, just revealing 3 cards. And here we see an Autumn stats and the pretty important Lighting Press reveal from the top of his deck. So right now Gregory Patellis will still have the info that the Briar player could be potentially playing some kind of hybrid build, but we'll see how this game will go off. So right now we are expecting Gregory Patelis to either block the single arcane damage that Sonata Arcanix dealt, or to pitch a card to block for potentially additional arcane damage. And here we see a Merciful Retribution being pitched, one of those cards where it's really amazing during the middle game, especially against decks that don't want to run arcane barriers against you, like Briar does, being pitched, and it looks like a rune sand will be created from the Briar side, potentially threatening a second point of hurricane damage. And here we see an entwine lighting being played from Briar's hand, being fused with a pulse of Candlehold, one of those really cheap double element cards, meaning that right now Zardinth will swing for a clean 4 again while still threatening an arcane damage. The arcane damage being prevented from the floating, and it looks like the Gregory Patellis will just take the 4 damage, wanting to potentially threaten an instant speed aura creation from the Prism side. So let's see what the Briar will attempt. Oh, here we see one of those big players from the Briar side, a Revelin Runeblood, going to the full aggressive side. So hello there, player 2. Thanks for dropping by. And here we see these so aggressive turn 1 of the Briar, swinging for 4 arcane damage with the Revelin Runeblood by Rune Sands, and 2 arcane damage from Zeta and 2 physical. And it looks like that the Prism player will cleanly pitch 6 in order to attempt to block 5 of these arcane damage, getting down to 33, having 1 floating, and potentially attempting to block the 2 from Rosetta. Okay, it looks like this has been concluded. He took all the damage, and we go back to Prism turn. That's a really strong first turn from the Briar side, also being able to create that single embodiment of lighting that will be able to be maintained for the next turn, and while setting up Arsenal, giving the Prism already a really hard time to face off. So let's see what the Prism player will attempt to do to attempt to retaliate to such a strong opener to the to the Briar side. So and that's the thing really with Prism facing off decks like this, where they really put the pressure up upon her, and she really doesn't want the game to go that way. She really wants to take her time and attack with her heralds. And right now we see a Herald of Protection being played, swinging for a 6, go again by pitching a yellow card. Luminaris being one of those really amazing staple light illusionist weapons, where it effectively gives go again to any attack, any illusion attack you might play, because it's just so valuable to already run a bunch of yellow cards. So right now the Briar player traditionally is not running a lot of 6 attack cards, but that depends on how much prepared the Briar player could be to face off a deck like Prism. So it looks like the Briar is thinking about his block. Yeah, that's some leftover pitch stayed there, and it looks like a 6, potentially threatening again, potentially threatening to create a spectral shield. So it's it's really interesting to see, because Briar could just take up the damage, but that's where the problems start to pop off. And here we see a Command and Conquer instantly being used to pop off Prism's turn, where she just accepts her fate and put a card in Arsenal and ending her turn. Having this mix and match of 6 attack cards against a deck like Prism sometimes is so valuable, because she's not able to keep up a great amount of pressure without having these reliable 6 go against and all this great attack with these annoying effects. But what will really be up to is how fast the Briar player will attempt to push Prism into a point where she will have to block. And here we see one of those key cards again, a Channel Mount Heroic, giving attack action cards in his hand the massive +3 attack, making it pretty much that every attack in Briar's hand is able to pop off attacks from Prism, and if the Briar player gets a turn with his operational Channel Mount Heroic, having to face a massive turn. And here we see just pretty much a cycle from the Briar's hand, from the Briar side, swinging for just a 2 physical with Rosetta. A quick reminder that Channel Mount Heroic only pumps up attack action cards, not attacks in general, so that means that Rosetta's Thorn attack value is not increased due to Channel Mount Heroic. So right now the Prism is on this really hard spot where she faces off a Briar with an Arsenal and a Channel Mount Heroic, and that's exactly what the Briar player wants to do. That's exactly what the Briar wants to push the game to, because if he manages to find a card like Force of Nature, the turn could be potentially really annoying. And here we see, whoa, an Arclight Sentinel being played from Arsenal, potentially blocking or stopping completely the Briar's turn. And that's one of those cards where Prism really loves to use, really loves to give this hard stop to a lot of decks that want to set up these amazing and fully aggressive turns. And it's really strong from the Prism side as a response, because also the thing is that if the Briar does not have the cards desired to pitch to be able to pitch 2 Earth cards in order to maintain Channel Mount Heroic, pretty much all the value he has gained from setting up Channel Mount Heroic is gone. And let's see what the Briar player will attempt to do. It looks like he will create a Runescent token by pitching an Earth card, by pitching a blue with Earth, and attacking just with a Rosetta Thorn, and popping off with a Runescent. But that means that this is it's goodbye for Channel Mount Heroic, unless the Briar player is running something amazing like Blink. But it looks like he will be able to 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 pitch 2 cards in order to attack. And yeah, it looks like the Rosetta was. It looks like he was not attacked with Rosetta. The board is a bit messy. It looks like the attack towards the Sentinel was with Command and Conquer, in which case the Runescent does pop. Yeah, Nakazume, that's correct. If you attack with Rosetta, the Runescent is not popping when attacking Spectras, but if you are attacking with an attack action from hand, the Runescents will pop off. But that's really strong from the Briar side, being able to maintain the Channel Mount Heroic for a second turn, and that's so precious, because unless Prism has the lack of a devil, which is not something that traditionally Prism is expected to do, she won't be able to stop a second turn from the Channel Mount Heroic being on the board. So let's see what the Prism player will attempt to do. Nevertheless, Prism is on that position where she really loves having a full card hand, but there are a lot of hands in a Prism deck, especially running towards the Aura build, where she might be able not to fully operate. So it looks like there will be a use of Dreamweavers to remove the Phantasm from the next attack action card that Gregory Patellis will play. And it looks like we see pitching another Road to Wrath to play an attack that will not allow Briar to simply kick off with a single attack from his hand. And that's really precious on moments like this where if Prism manages to attack with a really interesting card, being so that she will force cards out of his hand. So it looks like a Phantasmaclasm was played to attack while removing the Phantasm keyword. So it looks like the Briar has this really stacked hand with a lot of Lightning Surges and the Swarming Gloom Veil, threatening a pretty massive attack for the next turn. It looks like that the Phantasmaclasm will swing for 9, which is to be amazing, and it looks like that it will kick off the single non-attack action in Briar's hand and allow him to cycle through. Non-attack action is something that most of the time you don't really like seeing from the Runeblade side of things. So right now he's facing a massive 9 attack from Phantasmaclasm with potentially Go Again. The Phantasmaclasm being played by pitching a yellow, giving it Go Again, and the single counter from Tunic going for 9 Go Again, even though it has a 3 cost, being able to push this massive damage. And this is the life lead where the Prism player really wants to have in a matchup like this, expecting to getting hit by a pretty big turn from the Briar side. So let's see what the Prism player will attempt to do for a follow-up. It looks like we see another blue pitch and playing a Miraging Metamorph. This card having the Phantasm keyword, meaning that Red Lightning Surge will be able to pop off the really strong new addition from Everfest for Prism, the Red Miraging Metamorph. And it looks like that's the turn of the Prism, managing to swing to deal this picky 9 damage with Phantasmaclasm, but right now the gas is on, it's Briar's time to start kick off and push all that much desired damage. So the only thing with Briar right now is because the Prism player has witnessed the card from the Briar's hand, it looks like that the Prism player does not have many ways to give Go Again to his attacks, and even though the Channel Mount Heroic is on board, he might not be able to deal a massive turn back to the Prism player. So let's see, Briar is sitting on a healthy 30 life total, while Prism having the same amount of life. With Briar, while being on the defensive side, is not the best position she wants to be in, but it looks like she will manage for the time being. The thing with Briar is that the big difference with other rune blades is that Briar, most traditional Briar builds are not expected to have turns that will not deal a decent amount of damage, because she doesn't run traditionally, again, that high amount of non-attacks or cards that do not actually attack. So it looks like we will see a Pulse of Candlehorn playing from the arsenal. He really wanted to set this up with a great turn with something like Sonata Arcanix, but it looks like that missing his Sonata with Phantasmaclasm did not allow him to get his valuable embodiment of lighting and keep pushing the damage through. So let's see what the Briar player will do with the rest of his turn. We do know that he still has some attack action in his hand. that he could potentially use to attack the Prism player. So right now we see a Swarming Gloomveil swinging for 7. Right now having 0 auras created, meaning that it doesn't have Go Again and it doesn't have the +1 or the third effect, meaning that this is just a clean 7 attack turn that he either has to sacrifice Snapdragon Stealers to deal an extra attack, or that 7 will just do for the Briar turn, which should be something that he really wants to. So it looks like that I'm not sure about that, but if I recall the ruling correctly, because Briar Warden of Thorns is on an hit effect that he creates an embodiment of Earth token, and Go Again check is something that happens during the final step of the attack. Swarming Gloomveil could potentially get Go Again if it hits by triggering Briar's passive ability of create an embodiment of Earth token. So that's something that's really tricky. I'm not 100% sure about this, but I think that's the correct order of timings with Swarming Gloomveil and Briar. And it looks like that Prism is still thinking about if he wants to block, because there is still, I think it's a mystery card from Briar's side. The Prism doesn't have the information of what's the last card in Briar's hand. So probably the worst case scenario would be something like Snatch or another zero cost attack to deal another 7 points of damage. But right now a clean 6 attack with Swarming Gloomveil looks like that will do the trick. So that's the thing with Prism, where this insane speed that the game is going on is not something that the Prism player really likes to have to face against. She really wants to have her time and set up her auras and keep this slow play where at some point the enemy will start missing attacks to deal with auras and with specters and stuff like this. But Briar is on the totally other side of the spectrum, where she really doesn't want the game to go very long. She just really wants to have the game end as quickly as possible, and it looks like we will see a 6 block from the Prism side, blocking with 2 cards, not allowing him to gain the Go Again from Briar's effect, and right now it will give his turn back to Prism. Prism should feel, Gregory Patellis right now should feel really okay having faced a Channel Mount Heroic with not much of an effect, and here we see another Phantasmaglasm to again attempt to intercept with his opponent, attempt to disrupt his big turns, these big Briar turns, while still attempting to push damage. So it looks like there is again, as to be expected, a really red heavy zero cost for attack hand from the Briar side, something that the Briar player Gian Arnandi managed to do pretty spectacular, really, to set up a pretty great turn with the double fused card for his next turn, setting up a Lighting Surge and then Twine Lighting to keep the pressure going against the Prism player. And we see something interesting, a red lead the charge. That's one of those cards where if Briar had a moment earlier to walk around that annoying guardian from from Prism could potentially allow him to leak a lot of damage. But right now, Gregory Patellis is really happy with seeing this card in Briar's hand because it's a zero cost card that right now almost threatens zero damage. So, and that's the thing really with Prism and why this deck has been so consistent, being either one of the best decks of the meta game since Monarch came up, or being one of those really close to be one of the best deck, because even if her game plan is a bit disrupted and she forces to go to the, let's say, aggressive route, cards like Phantasmaclasm have just amazing value against decks that do not have a great amount of 6 attack cards. And right now the only decks that can reliably have a lot of 6 attack cards are probably either Guardians or Brutes, and that's not some decks that we are really used to seeing apart from Star of the Show Bravo. So back to Briar's turn. Here we see an Entwined Lighting being fused, gains go again, forget again, something that we are used to see a lot from something that you're used to see a lot from the side of the Briar today. So it looks like he will follow up with Lead the Charge, something that gives visually good again or gives back the action point to any kind of attack that the Briar will attempt to play. So here we see Lead the Charge giving back the action point with Lightning Surge, swinging for an additional 4. I believe the Briar should have made an Embodiment of Earth right now because the Entwined Lighting hit and the Lightning Surge hit. Really, this being one of the huge differences with Briar after she got the errata that she's not allowed to create more than one Embodiment of Earth. And here we see the last another Lightning Surge being played from Arsenal, so it's again a massive 12 damage round, something that all of the time we see, and pitching another blue card to create a Runescent token and swing with Rosetta, and that's why you never want to allow a deck like Briar to have his full hand, because that's what happens. A massive 15 damage turn, no, 17 damage turn. So it looks like that the Prism player chose to take all the damage. It looks like that she really wants to have her turn not feeling threatened by the pressure of Briar. And here again we are really close to the point where the game will be to, she really wants to do her huge turn. Natizuma, that's correct, yeah, because Prism managed to keep a pretty high life total, and seeing all these cards that deal cleanly damage having no additional effects, she should be pretty happy about taking and receiving all this damage from the Briar side. So it looks like that the Prism player will open with a red Wartune Herald, giving it go again from a yellow Peach, and pretty much checking if there is if there is a 6 attack card in Briar's hand, because he would instantly want to pop probably the Wartune Herald. Let's see how much hide and seek these players right now want to play, because since Wartune Herald hit it and went into Prism's soul, she will Red Herald, the King of Baits, that's correct, but it looks like he will follow up with a Herald of Protection Blue, threatening to create a Spectral Shield, and this is where the value from the Prism player starts to kick in. Because right now, even the Herald of Protection hit it, it goes into the soul again, creating a Spectral Shield, and because everything has go again to allow her to keep pressure with the Spectral Shields. But Briar sees through all of these lies and deception that the Prism player will attempt. But no, it looks like he held a Herald of Erudition from Arsenal, a really big poker game being played from Gregory Patellis the Briar. Let's see if Briar was able to see through all of these random attacks or if he wanted to keep a big attack to block the next phantasm from Prism. The thing is though that yes, correct, because the Arcanite Skull Cap and Grasp of the Arcanite still have the full armor value that just a single card will probably be able to fully block the Herald of Erudition. But that's amazing. Seeing a Reveling Runeblade removed from a Briar's hand should feel like a win because we are at this point at these really critical life totals where it's really close to the point where the players will be forced to block with a lot of cards from their hand, and Prism really doesn't like to operate with too little cards because her attacks are not as efficient, let's say, as a deck like Briar's, where everything could have from go again to having zero cost for attacks. So right now, even though it was a win for Prism that the Briar has a 3-card turn rather than a 4-card turn, and it looks like he opens with a Sting of Sorcery, trying to push through these annoying arcane damage and swinging with a Scar for Scar. Really, at this point of the game, Scar for Scar being a staple for Briar, swinging for this annoying zero cost for a 4 and go again, threatening a lot of damage again from Prism. So right now the Briar player could potentially finish up with either a Rosetta from Tunic or having another attack with go again and Rosetta, potentially allowing Prism to go to a pretty low life total. The thing is that again, these are cards that do not have any effects on hit. They do not threaten way more damage than it is already presented on the table. So if Gregory Patellis has a pretty interesting turn from his side, he might choose to, for the last time probably, accept the damage and the punishment from the Briar side of things. But the thing is, if he attempts to do that, there are not many more turns left for the Prism player, because if he is not able to close up the game, the the damage output from Briar will eventually catch up. So one of those nail-biting moments from both players right now. The good thing from Prism is that any other potential arcane damage could be blocked, but if the Briar player just chooses to attack with Rosetta, if Briar chooses to attack with Rosetta, he will having to lost some resources. Nekazuma reads, can Briar threaten lethal this turn? Well, potentially if he has a card from hand like Snatch, or and having still able to use his Snapdragon Scalers, he could potentially deal another. No, I think the only card that could potentially threaten lethal from Briar should be Snatch, but it looks like there is a Lightning Press, a Lightning Press being played from his hand to deal an additional 3 damage and attempt to push him to a really low life total. So it looks like that's the hand of the Briar has been played, another 4 damage, and here Prism at this point, where if she wants to take the damage, gain down to just 2 hit points, and hoping to force the Briar to get on a defensive spot so she won't be able to retaliate ever again during this game to a point. So, having a 2 life total from this turn should feel nice from Prism, but it really depends how good Briar should be able to block, because Still, the Phantasm effect is active for Prism, and we've seen some cards from the Warden side. We've seen some cards from Briar side that are able to pop off Prism's attacks, and also the Briar player masterfully managed to keep his great armor pieces like Grasp of the Arcanite, the points of armor that are really strong during these final turns of the game. And it looks like, yeah, again, the king of the baits, a Fortune Herald, an attack that will deal 5 damage, get into soul, and potentially threaten lethal with her next attack. And here we see if Briar wants to start committing cards from his hand or wants to get dealt the damage and go down to 3 points of damage. The thing is that we haven't seen a lot of dominate attacks yet from Prism, so right now Gregory Patellis might be representing a dominate attack, so Briar has to think that if he wants to not block this attack in order to have more information about the Prism player hand, that he might be faced off some lethal damage to a dominate attack and potentially being killed out. That not being that easy while still having the Grasp of the Arcanite and Fendel Tunic as block, but you never know. It's something that definitely the Briar player wants to consider. The strong point is that still she has an embodiment of Earth, and there are a few 3 armor non-attack cards in the Briar deck, so she could potentially value block with a 4 armor card with a non-attack. And it looks like, no, we will see a fully block, 3 from Weave Earth and 2 from Lightning Surge, fully blocking the 5 of Wartune Herald. Prism does not want, the Briar does not want to take any more damage from Prism, and she wants to have to see more annoying cards from the Prism side. So it looks like a blue passing Mirage was pitched in order to create a Spectral Seal token instantly with Sculptor of Light, again because there is a yellow pitch card in the zone. Luminaris gives Gian pretty much everything, but the Briar is not that afraid at this point and just takes the 1 damage from Spectral Shield while having 2 floating, not being that afraid from the Prism side. So Gregory Patelis has a single more card in hand. He could threaten a pretty strong Herald as well, and it looks like, yes, there it is again, the second Herald of Erudition, masterfully played by both players. Briar managed to keep the armor up so he could block an annoying card like this, and blocking with a lead the charge for 3 plus 2 from the Grasp of the Arcanite, totally blocking the Herald of Erudition. If Briar did a greedy misstep there, this could potentially be game over for her, because if that Herald of Erudition has hit it and allowing Prism to draw 2 additional cards and potentially attack once again with one of those huge heralds, it could be that to that really annoying state. So it looks like it will be a clean Ravenous Rabble, wow, to a Gorganian Tome. Gorganian Tome having 0 pitch means that Ravenous Rabble will swing for a massive 5. It's right now, I think, the only card in the game that allows Ravenous Rabble to swing for 5, and that should be huge because there are a lot of cases where Prism would love to be able to pseudo block with his equipment, with his tunic, with boots, in order to prevent most of the damage and even go down to a single life point to still maintain a 4 card hand. But that massive 5 probably means that he has either to commit a card from his hand or he has to sacrifice his tunic. No, no, it's right now no way to block without committing a card from hand because he could potentially gain one from Tunic in order to activate Phantasmal Footsteps and block for one, two with Tunic, and third for the Spectral Shield. But that five makes it though that two damage get to leak through, so she's dead being to down 2 hit points. That was really huge from the Briar side, being able to maintain this match aggression with a single card from his hand. So it looks like Gregory Patellis will take his time to think if he wants to block or not, and really, there has been some good information though about that tome on the top of his deck because he right now knows that there is one less card in the Briar's hand that is able to block, so he might be able to leak through set damage if he had that massive hand turn. Also, the thing is that Prism should feel a bit frightened because if Briar manages to keep just the Gorganian Tome in his hand and draw potentially any zero cost 4 attack and use Snapdragons, he could potentially threaten a pretty annoying turn with just a single card from his hand. So Prism right now is in that really tough spot where he probably he has to block this Ravenous Rabble, and he still has to put up enough pressure because probably the if the Briar gets a 3 card turn, he might be able to potentially threaten a lot of damage to the Prism side. Really, that run in 40 something was such a huge deal, and that's something that doesn't occur pretty often, but everybody remembers it way more when this happens, where you remember the full value you get from Ravenous Rubble swinging for the massive 5. So right now it looks like he will use the pitch from Tunic and block with Tunic in order to prevent prevent the spectral shield from being destroyed, hoping to have this last spectral shield, this last point of armor and potential attack to force the Briar's hand into blocking. Right now Briar is not expecting to be able to use Arcanite Skullcap, but it looks like she still has 2 points of armor with Grasp of the Arcanite and Fielded Tunic. And here we see Herald of Protection with Gian by pitching a yellow and facing a really annoying 6 go again. If it hits, create a second spectral, and that's something that definitely the Briar has to commit in order to block. And the thing that Ravenous Rabble did not manage to hit is the reason that Briar does not right now have her real much needed embodiment of Earth in order to pump up the defense of these non-attack actions. So let's see what the Briar player chooses to do. It's really been an amazing game so far, both players being really toe to toe with each other. It looks like the Briar player still thinks about his block, and it looks like he will block with a Swarming Gloom Veil, definitely or probably not having that big attack to fully prevent the Herald of Protection. Means right now that 3 damage leak through, and the 3 damage means that another card will be added to the soul and another spectral seal will be created, making it so that these spectral seals at this point of the game being so annoying, potentially threatening to be used both as attacks and as defense. And because Prism right now has at least two cards in his soul, she could potentially go to a point where she manages to just pitch some cards in order to attack with a spectral shield. The good thing from the Prism side though is that probably there wasn't been a pop from this attack and some damage was able to leak through. It looks like probably we have some technical issues about rotating the spectral shield. That's correct. If the skull cap was up and potentially block this herald to not create the additional spectral shield token, could be so important. So right now it looks like that Prism will attack with two spectral shield, letting Prism down to 2 points of life and allowing him to have a 3 card hand, and that's a big moment for Briar, because right now if Briar manages to pull a pretty annoying turn and force either the whole hand from the Prism side or leak some damage, we could see potentially the last turn of the first week of this league. Briar should also be feeling really great because there are the Prism deck has a lot of cards that are not. Prism has a lot of cards that have 0 block value or low block value. That means that if Briar manages to pull off one of those aggressive turns, he could potentially either force Prism to overblock or overcommit cards from his or her hand, or potentially even not having cards in order to block. So it looks like we will see a blue Force of Nature pitch in order to create a Runescent token. That line of play we see so many times from the Prism side. Having the one floating after a barrage of attacks to swing with. Again, and here we see a Snatch, definitely a card that the Prism player did not like to see. So right now we see a single Runescent being attacked to, either being blocked by a Spectral Shield or to get pitch in order to block by the Prism player in order to prevent the destruction of the Spectral Shield. But the Briar player having the Snapdragon Scalers up means that it's an easy line of play to simply give go again to Snatch and potentially threaten with Rosetta. But the last card in Briar's hand is where the tricky part is, because right now both of the players are looking for of how many copies of Lighting Press have been used. So right now, if the Prism player decides to just block enough damage to not let the Snatch go through, the instant speed pump effect from the Briar side could potentially threaten lethal damage to end the game right here. And that's a really interesting spot, but it really goes a lot of times to this point where some decks or some players, you do not have the luxury of playing around cards like this. You do not have the luxury of overblocking on such fatigued positions like we are right here. So A soul shield here would be amazing. A pitch blue and a soul shield to fully prevent the snatch. That's a great point, Nekizuma. And it looks like Gregory Patellis is taking his time to think about how he wants to proceed. The potential block from the Phantasmal Footsteps is still up. He still has 4 cards in hand and decided to keep the last card in his hand, to put the last card in his hand to Arsenal, Gregory Patellis, rather than using to pitch it to create a Spectral Shield and keep pushing, so we might see some tricks being hidden in Gregory's arsenal. And right now we are witnessing this immense pressure that the Briar is able to pull off. That having all these annoying numbers, that fours and some arcane and Rosetta with 2 and 2, and being that really strong point where she really manages, it's almost, you're almost unable to fully block well the way that damage goes through. And let's see if we had a Doomsayer on our chat, Nakazuma, while he starts off by pitching a Haze Bending to prevent the arcane damage, and it looks like just block a single point with Phantasmal Footsteps and committing a single card to fully block 4 damage while maintaining both the Spectral Shields. So something to be expected here is the use of Snapdragon Scalers in order to go again, and on the go again we will see an attack with Rosetta Thorn for 2 physical and 2 arcane. And right now that means that Gregory Patellis will manage to have an additional turn during this game. That was not the last turn of the game for Gregory Patellis. The one floating from the blue means that he's still able to prevent 1 of the 2 arcane damage, and potentially if he wants to, he could let it all go through, because the one floating prevents 1 arcane damage and the other 3 damage are blocked by the Spectral Shields, leaving him to a single life. That not being as annoying as it is with some other decks, because on a potential Rosetta Thorn attack, the Prism player has the option of creating a Soul Shield to block the second arcane damage, but if we get to a point where Briar gets a big hand, the game should be over either way. So it looks like we are... it looks like Gregory Patellis is paying to prevent 1 point of arcane damage before the Rosetta resolves and the first Spectral Shield got destroyed, and it looks like, yeah, the Prism player really wants to have his final big turn, being left on a single life total, being so much threatened by Grasp of the Arcanite. And again, it's so important this turn that Briar, Warden of Thorns, did not manage to land an attack action, creating this embodiment of Earth, meaning that probably a great amount of cards in his deck are simple 2 attack action, 2 armor actions, and that's something that's really annoying when playing Briar, or when playing Briar on the defense position. So Gregory Patellis managed to save 2 cards in his hand and arsenal, so it goes again to this point if he's able to have a pop, and we see again the blue Wartion Herald, the king of baits, this 1-cost herald that has seen so many uses since Prism came out. Probably one of the most played cards in all 3 colors for the Prism deck, and here exactly is why this is happening, because with a single pitch you still have floating for potential activation of Phantasmal Footsteps if something goes really wrong, and it's an amazing opener because if this hits it will get into the soul, but we are at this point of the game where The just two last points of life from Briar means that she's not able to allow this Fortune Herald to hit. It's really important right now also that the Arcanite Skull Cap is totally off. There is no way again to be able to use the armor from the Arcanite Skull Cap, so Briar right now still has two armor, one from Tunic, one from Grasp of the Arcanite, potentially meaning that he could block with a Runeblade attack and from the gear to fully prevent the Fortune Herald. And here we see a Channel Mount Heroic being used to block the Fortune Herald, and let's see if he wants to commit a second card. Channel Mount Heroic at this stage of the game being one of those cards where you don't really want or have the time to set up, since the game is at the point where everything is in fatigue range. And it looks like the Briar player is thinking if he wants to commit a second card or which second card to commit, because right now with the damage presented on the board with the 5 from Fortune Herald, Briar is dead. So here we see and another 3 armor card being removed from Briar's hand. 2 3 armor cards being used, and here we see the fractal replication. That's what Gregory has been saving in his arsenal all this time. The fully blocked from the Fortune Herald means that the Fortune Herald gets to stay on the chain link, meaning that the fractal replication has this amazing value of 0 with attacking with 5 and getting the effect of the other cards, because so far this game at no point the Briar player allowed a Herald to stay on the chain, because of he either destroyed the attack by blocking with a high attack action card, or he took the damage, meaning that the card is no longer on the chain link but it's right now on Prism's soul. So that's one of the amazing things with fractal replication, that for a 0 cost he gets to represent a second 5 attack Herald. And it looks like we will see the full commitment from Briar. We will see him using the last pieces of his equipment and the 2 armor Ravenous Rubble, probably forcing the Tunic as well. It's always so depressing to block with your 2 counter Tunic, knowing that you will lose these 3 extra pitch on your following turn. Especially in a deck like Briar, where she really wants to utilize that 1 point of pitching to attack with Rosetta. Okay, that means that the attack was blocked by 4, he took 1 damage, and because fractal replication also copies the abilities of action cards and translate the name of any card to its own name, it means that since fractal replication hit it, it goes directly into the hero's soul, as if it were a Fortune Herald. So a really nail-biting game, some really nail-biting turns being shown right here, and Prism managed to do something that she really loved to. She just left Briar with 2 cards in hand, 1 card in his arsenal, 1 card in his arsenal, and 1 card in his hand. Just a 2 card play, and right now we see the snatch. The good thing is about this snatch that Briar, the Prism player, should think that the last card in his arsenal is not the reaction, because he could have played the reaction on his last turn, potentially threatening lethal if the attack landed. Unless so the Zardith player, unless Gian Arnandi is a 4-dimensional chess player, there is almost no way that the last card in his arsenal is a reaction. So right now Gregory Patellis is also faced with a 4-card attack, but still it's really annoying to that the thing with Briar, it's really annoying to having to face off against cards with 4 attack, because almost 0 cards in Prism's deck have this clean value. So right now he has 2 cards, he has to commit at least 2 cards to fully prevent his attack with Snatch and not get threatened to be dealt lethal. It looks like we see a pitch of fractal replication and a block with a Herald of Protection, blocking a total of 4, completely negating the Snatch, and Briar should feel really happy about this, because Briar should really feel happy about this because he committed 2 cards from his hand. It looks like we have a on Briar's turn on activation from Prism, because Prism Scalper of Light effect is a once per turn instant, meaning that if he wants to fully commit his hand to create runes to create spectral sealed tokens, he has to activate it once in its opponent's turn and once during his own. So it looks like that Briar got her full hand back up, and it's back to Gregory Patellis' turn, where it looks like he's attacking with just a single spectral sealed token, swinging for 1. And that's the really annoying part with Prism, because right now just a single point of damage is enough to threaten lethal and draw a card from Briar's hand. That's one of the points where we don't really see the Briar player being, but it's one of the strongest points from Prism's side. So let's see, pretty much the decision making for the Briar player right now, it's which card he's able to afford to lose, and potentially losing a second card to an activation of Prism and the creation of a second spectral shield. And that's exactly what we are witnessing. A second creation of a spectral shield and the second attack of a spectral shield, meaning that the Briar player will be forced to remove a second card. Kodachi McVagwan says that Kodachi winnable shield. Yeah, that's the point of the game, where it really represents attacking with Kodachis, and that this little life total, it's so interesting. So we see 2 Enlightened Strikes being removed from the Briar's hand, which makes sense because it's not easy to utilize an Enlightened Strike while having so little cards in hand. So it's back to the Briar's turn, but right now Briar managed to have a turn this time with 2 cards in hand, and that's amazing. Here, and he opens with a blue pitch Tome of Harvest in order to create a Runescent token with Grasp of the Arcanine. That's a pretty typical line of play, but that's what to be expected from deck. And here we see a red lead the charge being played. He really wants to give Go again his next attack, and here we see a Snatch swinging for 4 with Go again this time and the single Runescent token. That means that Briar managed to do that amazing thing called attack with Rosetta Thorns, and this is the point where we most of the times see Rosetta Thorn sign, where if you manage to do the typical 1-2 kick with Rosetta Thorn, it just represents so much damage split in so many little different variances, and that's the way that most Runebleed players on the current meta love to close up their games. Okay, it looks like we witness blue pitching from the Prism, preventing the arcane damage and the force snatch. Prism also being one of those decks where CD has the tools to play on this fatigue style of game, because Phantasmal Footsteps on these small attacks is just so easy to be repeatable. So right now the Snatch has an additional 3 damage potential to go through, and here we see a red Warden Herald being blocked to fully block the Snatch. But the additional action point from Lead the Charge means that from the remaining pitcher there will be an attack from Rosetta Thorn. There will be an attack. So that means that the one floating and one spectral prevents the Prism from dying, and we see another 2 attack. That means that Prism player will just be able to barely to hold with a single card in hand and potentially stay alive with his single spectral shield. But that's the thing, that right now Briar had to commit its arsenal, and if we see this Kodachi line of play again with from the Prism side, we might get to a point where the Briar won't be able to respond as efficiently as it did this turn, and if Prism gets a turn, this might be devastating for the Briar. And that's really the strongest thing with Prism right now, is that how well she is able to perform with just a marginal amount of cards in hand. Right now the Prism was able to live through and potentially threaten these annoying Kodachi attacks against Briar with just either a single card in hand or 2 cards hand, and that's amazing. So right now it looks like Gregory Patellis thinks the way he wants to set up. He might be thinking if he wants to set a card in arsenal, or keep attacking. So there is one more card in Soul. That means that the Prism player won't be able to keep doing this annoying thing where he's able to fully block all the time the annoying arcane damage coming from Briar. MacVag1 reads Prism is the most versatile hero by far. That's true. It's amazing how well the Prism as a hero is able to transition from being a full aggressive deck to a somewhat defensive to a value Kodachi like deck. So it looks like Prism managed to, as expected, get a card from Briar's turn. Let's see if he has a yellow. He managed to snatch a yellow, removing the last card from his soul to create a second spectral shield, and that's the super annoying thing with Prism, where right now even those small spectral shields threaten lethal damage to the Briar. That means that the Briar player has to commit a second card in hand, and even though Briar is one of those decks where can perform with a few cards in hand, it's not easy to be able to perform a great turn with so little cards and be able to get through enough damage to threaten the shields. The good thing right now from the Briar side is that Prism has no cards left in soul. So if he manages to have an instant speed kill action or something like that, it's interesting that the Prism player no longer has a response to that annoying turn. It looks like again we see the typical Runesense token into Briar. Would really love to have a zero cost Gian card right now, but most of the Gian zero cost Gians Briar has do need a specific secondary requirement, which is not easy to be able to check if you are at a single hit point with no cards in hand and no cards in arsenal. So we've seen a Runesend being created, and either if the Briar attacks with a single, no, it looks like the Briar will choose to attack with an Entwine Lighting and a Runesend token for a single point of arcane damage and 4 attack, forcing the Prism player to split. If he wants to fully block the cards in his hand, he has to pitch at least one for the arcane and at least commit one card from his hand. And it looks like we will see blue pitch from Prism to prevent the arcane, and again paying one to block with footsteps, making it so that he's able to fully block the Entwine Lighting without losing any spectral shields. And this is a huge win for Prism, because at last she managed to have a turn after so much time with 2 cards in hand. 2 cards in hand and 2 spectral shields, and the thing is that the Briar player should be feeling really wacky right now, because if he doesn't have a way to stop this Herald attack, it means that he is going to potentially die. So Miraging Metamorph is really annoying right now, because if it doesn't have an attack like Command and Conquer to destroy and trigger the Phantasm effect, it means that it's almost impossible to block well without committing all of his hand. So right now, pretty much for Briar, the thing is that if he doesn't have, and we have a full card reveal from hand, we have Lighting Press and Ravenous Rabble. And it looks like that he's explaining right now if he wants to fully block the Miraging Metamorph. He has no cards left in hand, so he just simply dies to a Spectral Shield, to the Spectral Shield attack. And Gregory Patellis looks like he managed to do the impossible, making it the 3-2, giving the lead and the first win for FAB Chaos towards Team Invader, playing such a hard last game, nail beating towards the very end. Such a close game, really masterfully executed by both players, playing this really interesting game of decisions and blocking and bluffing with their attacks. Really, this was a masterfully executed game, as to be expected from players that regularly have places in skirmish and quest events like that. So that's the end of week 1 of season 2 for the CTL League. FAB Chaos managed to win its first game of the league, its first game of the season, starting off with a 1 win with a 3-2 to Team Invaders. So thanks a lot for stepping in. That's the last game of the week, so we might come back next week for some additional games. Thanks so much for stopping by. If you like the content, we will try to stream and record all the games from the league. Thank you again for stopping by. This is your host Saxo, and hit the follow. And if you like, you can find us on Twitter as FabChaos or follow us on YouTube. So thanks again for stopping by, and congratulations to both FabChaos and Team Invader. So thank you very much, and see you around. Until next time.